in a way you could say it's become our mutual fate to willingly or unwillingly be in the midst of a metamorphosis of life on earth. When all of nature is in turmoil and storm, and when all of culture is in upheaval and conflict, it's a complete metamorphosis is needed in regard to both, and in order to bring the two back together again. And so, and because humans are implicated in most levels of the current crises in both nature and in culture, a transformation of humanity is required. That's one way to look at the world. That when everything goes wrong, when the world goes wrong, humans have to transform just as nature has to transform. And whereas change can mean to alter or to make different, to transform literally means to transition from one form to another form. And that's a radical thing. That's a big change. That's not something easily accomplished. And yet, the old stories say, it is the nature of our soul to transform, that our souls came here not to become steady, not to fit in somewhere, but to transform. And the thing we're supposed to transform into is our original core self, the authentic self within us. What we're trying to become, what we need to become, what we're longing to be in touch with is something authentically inside us. I'm just telling the old stories and turning them slightly into psychology. So when the world transforms, we're expected to transform. And so that becomes a complicated thing that first has to be imagined. And you could say that one of the first problems we encounter when we want to change meaningfully or transform is the limitations of the ego or the little self within. Because the little self, the ego, has a tremendous fear of change. And actually the little self fears that it will be annihilated if there's a major change. At least that's one way to look at it, that the ego forms early in life, and it forms in reaction to a sense of overwhelm in its own little realm. And so the ego is really arranged partially to never feel that overwhelm, to never feel that sense of annihilation again. And yet we are here to transform. And so that means we have an internal battle between the fears, the apprehensions of the little self, and the capacity to change, to heal, to grow, and to transform that exists in the soul and the deeper self. And when the world outside us is in turmoil, it intensifies the conflicts within us. And that happens whether we're paying attention to the news or not, because the soul takes in all kinds of information in subtle ways. At a certain point, we have to accept that we are implicated in the upheaval, that we are not able really to get away from it, and that our real task is to turn away from the roaring and turn towards the struggle to transform and become an authentic version of our own self. So the fact that the storms in nature are growing bigger and the conflicts in culture are growing greater is really can be seen as an indication that the two things are deeply entwined. The modern world separates nature and imagines humans as separate from nature when human nature is deeply connected to nature. That was the understanding in all the traditional cultures. Modern people have that turned around, and there was the fascination, or really the kind of inflation of the modern psyche, which thought that it could take over the world, that it knew better than nature, that it could dominate nature, and that it could rule the planet. And look what's happened. Everything's gone awry, because that's not the way it's supposed to work. As a matter of fact, the fate of humanity has always depended upon how we read and how we understand the living text of nature. Human cultures before modern times were connected to nature. They were influenced by nature. They learned to read nature, and they were educated and taught by nature. Now we have to be taught by the storms of nature, as if in some kind of desperate attempt to help us who awaken to what we're supposed to be doing, which is to become true versions of ourselves. And in doing that, our human nature becomes reconnected to great nature.
Michael Mead, who for more than 40 years now has been representing a mythopoetic view of life. And this is a classic presentation from him, brief, clear, piercingly uh, demanding, as if he were channeling some sort of vital voice of the web of life itself through soul. That's just how he talks. So I'm Dean Walker, and I'm speaking to you either here on the Poetry of Predicament as another episode, and it's sort of random for folks who are just watching here on the Poetry of Predicament. And you're certainly welcome to watch this. I would heartily recommend you watch it. You know, I have a unapologetic desire to see as many people from the Collapse-Aware, Collapse-Acceptant, and beyond communities around the world to join us in this extraordinary work of the inner work of collapse that we've taken on here in Living Resilience, small location here in the interwebs and in our online community space where we hold all of our courses and special focus groups and support groups and so on. Our largest offering by far in the 10 years we've been offering this kind of material is called Islands of Sanity in a Mad World. And it is a 13-month program. And this is one small piece of content in one of those months. And each month has curated a small amount of course material for those who have joined in. Every one of the Saturdays, we do online Zoom live events every first and third Saturday in each of the months of this course. And those 1 hour classes are all recorded in case somebody can't make it, and so on. So that should give you a little picture of what this is about, in addition to just being a standalone Poetry or Predicament episode. Uh, there's a very, very strong reason for offering Michael Mead's unequivocal words about the transformative nature of these times. We are truly called, along with all of our beyond human brethren on this planet and all other aspects of the web of life that of which we are part. Why I've started out this particular communication, this is the first of two segments of curriculum for the third month of this course, which again, it's completely fine for new people to come in and catch up, if you will, to join us for at any point in this Islands of Sanity course. What I'm noticing is that we're coming to the time where the rubber starts to meet the road in this inner work of collapse. It sounds good to a lot of folks who are collapse aware, or they know something, many somethings are not going well on this planet. And it's time to get going, time to get sincere about doing something about it, or something to prepare ourselves in some way. Hence, possibly the attraction to this idea of the inner work of collapse. And what I'm saying about this being a pivotal moment for many people, this is when we start to do the work that implies we start to explore and discern and learn about the number of different types of center, types of core elemental aspects of the human experience that exist in our bodies. And we've kind of created an unusual way to talk about those. So, of course, we've got our physical body, and our physical body has a center. Anybody who's done martial arts or dance or gymnastics and so on, we all know that about there's a center for this physical body and also a centered way to be in this body, to occupy this body. So it's well, so we're well. What we're saying is that there are a number of different aspects of ourselves that are core, just as important as our physical body. And we're asserting that there's a way to look at each of those core aspects as a body inside of this body. So there's more about the aspects where the reasons why we use that odd language. It actually is to serve a purpose. It's not meant to be some weird dogma or something. And in this first couple of months, we've just started to touch in on the first of those inner aspects that also has a center, another body, if you will. And this is the feeling body or the emotions body. And so we're just starting to try that on for size. What's it like to orient ourselves to a long ago forfeited felt sense of center with regard to our feeling body, our feelings, our emotions? The assertion, for those who have not touched this work at all, the assertion is that what we've done as a global culture, and particularly in the USA and the other privileged countries, is we have disconnected from all the core elements that bring us meaning and relationship in human life. That is another way to say that is we have forfeited our center, or our center has been actually taken from us. And that's a whole nother story, and we get into the details of that in some of our coursework. We're now starting to do some practices, starting to look at what is it going to take to reclaim our center with regard to our feelings, reclaim our center with regard to our mental body, if you will. We are in a global environment that is now saturated in fake news, in the absolute untrustability of virtually every type of human communication. We definitely need some sense making in this world. How do we make sense of this literally insane world? That's what we would call reclaiming center in the mental body, is sense making. So I hope you get the idea about this idea of reclaiming center in a number of aspects of our bodies and our human experience. And what I'm trying to say is that we are so saturated in that disconnected state, that state in which we override every conceivable warning signal from within our own bodies or the world around us, that we are not doing the right thing with regard to our relationships with other human beings or with the earth itself or the beyond human brethren on this planet. We are clearly overriding every one of those early warning systems that are built into our bodies and built into our relationships. And it comes at great cost that we are overriding those warning signs. It's my hope that Michael Mead's communication, first and foremost, stresses some urgency to these times and how we are actually being called at a global scale to transform ourselves. Remember the Einstein quote, which is often misquoted as saying we cannot solve the problems we're encountering with using the same level of thinking we used when we created those problems. Close enough for the moment we'll use that interpretation. Another way of saying that is we need to transform ourselves, not just change our thinking. We actually need to transform ourselves, take ourselves from one form of human-like entity to another one. And part of my lifetime of work has been in transformation-based training and coaching and so on. And it's very much my experience that to transform is not like change a whole lot. Transformation is not just change. It is a fundamental reorganization and a transformation to have something very different come out, like the butterfly coming from the caterpillar, that kind of complete and utter reorganization of and reformation of the human experience. That's a big deal. Let me be real clear for you about this reclaiming of center that I was just talking about. There are some folks who will engage with those practices, of which there are many, and they're very important, and there is no wrong way to do it. There's sincere engagement is called for, and the ultimate outcome is hopefully that we're able to be more and more present in the face of larger and larger stressors, able to be more of service to those we love. That's really the bottom line of this work, this inner work of collapse. And so if what you are interpreting and when you're hearing reclaiming center is finding ways to be a bit more empowered, a bit more reclaim a bit more of long lost agency in life, a bit less of that feeling of despair, of meaninglessness that can creep in, or for many of us has crept in long ago. There's nothing wrong with that. That's great. Keep doing that. Do what works for you. Why I played that Michael Mead clip about soul, how does soul fit into this, is that is truly the language of transformation. Soul is the level at which true, deep, meaningful, lasting transformation occurs. And what he's suggesting is an orientation toward that soul path, to engage with that soul path. That is actually what we're talking about here when we're talking about reclaiming center. It is really a secondary and I would say far less meaningful way to engage with this conundrum, if you will, to adapt, to get ourselves back to business as usual, be more and more functional within that business as usual system and structure. Sure, that's a part of what we've got to deal with. We've got to find a way to adapt to these ridiculously large and challenging predicaments that we're facing. So sure, adapt. Make these useful tools for how to be more functional in the changing business as usual, kind of rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, so to speak. We all have to do some version of that, some amount of that. What I'm talking about here in this third month of this program, Islands of Sanity in a Mad World, is that this is far more powerfully seen as an access to soul, to reclaiming our innate, seated, deeply human and innately uh, inborn in us this access to soul, soul as the location where transformation can occur. So how that's going to look differently for some of us, this, we've all got full plates, full lives, and I've done my best to reduce the amount of content in this course. But there's a few things that I would like to suggest, no matter how you're participating so far. And if you're a new person looking at coming in, listen closely and please take any of these suggestions. Any one of them, if you were to take them on, will be of value. I promise you, these are well curated and long tested elements that I'm going to be suggesting a more robust engagement with in the coming months and the remaining months of this training and for the rest of our lives. One is uh, I can tell you that I've never been much of a journal person. At least I wasn't until 2015, and I'll tell you about that in a second. I would start it for a week or two, and then I had a number of started and never completed journals in my world, boxes of, of incomplete journals. 2015 came around, and that was when I really got my cage rattled in terms of the facts and figures that I was working off of since my teenage years when I became truly collapse aware and collapse acceptant. It wasn't until 2015 that I really had confirmed to my satisfaction that the figures that I've been told for 45 years were inaccurate. So they were most of the estimations of when things would truly, the shit would truly hit the fan was 2100. They kept throwing around 2100, these people who project these kind of impacts. And 2015 was the end of a couple of years of vetting some other material. That material was saying that we are not at all on a 2100 track. We're on a 2050 or 2030 track for many of the massive impacts that we will be realizing, we will be seeing, we will be saturated in as a result of our human endeavors, particularly for the past 80 years or so, and particularly for the last 40 years or so. This is why I'm suggesting if you aren't a journaler, this would be a great time to start your version of a journal. I can think of no more important time in human history to be able to keep track of your own personal path, your own personal adventures and misadventures in these times. There have never been times like this in the human experience. So I have long recommended that doing a journal is an essential element for the vast majority of people who will engage in this work, which, by the way, is a very small amount of the human Earth population. There is one particular journaling method that I would recommend highly. I've been um, challenged to come up with a journaling method that somehow is a hand in glove fit with this existential level track that we are all on in this inner work of collapse. And I've been checking out other people's journaling methods for years. And there's one in particular that, even though it was never intended to be existential in nature, never meant to be anything about the collapse of systems. In fact, it's years and years and years old. and it is one of the most popular to this day, one of the most popular journaling methods that has ever been introduced. And that is The Artist's Way from Julia Cameron. And so I would like to suggest to all the new folks who are just checking out this work and seeing if this is this a fit, am I interested? Please take this and run with it. If you have nothing else that's drawing your attention right now, I would strongly suggest pick yourself up a copy of The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron and follow her instructions. They're quite easy and they orient us to what is it to bring forth our ultimate inner creative. How do we do that? And she's really good at guiding us through that process. I would recommend it highly because there's something innately encouraging, if there's something hopeful in this entire conversation of the inner work of collapse, it is that we still have an immense amount of heart, of soul, of spirit, of an inner creative muse, that all of which add up to a formidable presence that we can choose to embody instead of uh, being caught in the whirlwind of despair, the swamp of despair that can easily sink into our systems if what we've got our focus on is what's wrong, what's collapsing, what's the problem, how are we polarized with our neighbors, and on and on and on. There is an innate strength and beauty built into the center of Julia Cameron's Artist's Way as a uh, journaling method to carry us through these, especially the initial years of what it is to truly come to terms with the human caused collapse of Earth and human systems that we are in and that will continue to be in deeper and deeper as the time goes on. So that's one strong suggestion for the existing participants who are engaged with this work in perhaps in the Islands of Sanity in a Mad World course, the information of which is down below in the show notes. And it's also a very sincere invitation for you, if you are a new person to this conversation of collapse awareness, collapse acceptance, and so on. Um, please consider taking on Julia Cameron's Artist's Way as a cornerstone to help you in this process of integrating this most challenging conversation in human history. This is a suggestion for the possibility of using another book from The Artist's Way. This is called Journal of Radical Permission, and its authors are Adrienne Marie Brown and Sonia Renee Taylor, two leading voices in the social justice and environmental justice aspect of what could be called the collapse-aware community. I don't know that they would use those words about themselves, collapse-aware or collapse-acceptant, but I certainly find a fit in their existential and soulful orientation to journaling. Their book, Journal of Radical Permission, is is just page after page of prompts for your journaling that you can choose from, obviously, that I have found to be extraordinarily heartful, soulful, and evoking um, a more grounded and a more inclusive view of what we're headed into, and a way to bring ourselves, presence ourselves through soul, through relatedness in a very deep and yet um, I don't want to say effortless, but in a way that is more organic and in which relationship is invited at a very deep level. So wanted to be sure to include that. And you've seen their names for the past few minutes. I've added them to there as well. So if you're in need of some suggestions for how to get your journaling going, either the Julia Cameron suggestion with the artist's way or the journal of radical permission, I'm hoping that between the two of those, you'll find ample prompting and context for powerful journaling. So the next piece that I would recommend is we only do a couple of 1 hour classes 2 Saturdays a month for these 13 months. That's not much. That's not much time together. The beating heart of this work is that we do it together, that we not do all of it alone. Some of it is alone. Most of it flourishes when we do it with others, when we learn to sit in circle with others, when we learn to curate an inborn uh, realization of what matters most to us. And then through that lens, we curate the practices of reconnection, practices of reclaiming center that most feed and support our realization of what matters most to us. Your practices, what matters most to you, and the practices you choose will be different than mine. And that's fine. That's what our circles are built for. There's a diversity of expression and presence and desire. These circles, and then beyond these circles, whatever you set up with your fellow participants or your family members or friends that you gather together to practice some of these elements that we're going to be introducing in these 13 months. This is where the real action happens in the inner work of collapse, when we sit in circle together, when we support one another in the realization of an expansion of capacity to be present in the face of larger and larger stressors. One of the skills that we absolutely grow in the course of this kind of engagement is our ability to hold space for others, not only participate in a good and responsible and full way in a circle, but also to learn more and more how to hold space for others. This is an extraordinarily essential element of being a functional human being in these coming times. I can't overstate it. So I hope you will hear this as like the artist's way on the very individual level, that your engagement, your enhanced engagement with other participants or with other people in your lives that you introduce this work to, it's our hope that you will see this as an essential skill set, capacity that you will grow while you are with other people in the context of this work. One part of what can happen when you get together with other people outside of those 2 1 hour classes every other week is you can start to do the practices of reconnection and practices of reclaiming center, like what I mentioned about the feeling body. We've already had the most basic first level training in how to do that kind of feeling body work. There are many other levels to go to in that feeling body work. Soon we will also be adding the reclaiming center in the mental body, the sense-making practices. These are also essential to do with each other. Without this kind of reorientation and reclaiming of our own centers and then our centers together with others in circle, there's very little hope for having any sincere experience of agency or home within ourselves, because our world is set up to take that away. It would, we are, I like to call it this, we are in a world of 24/7 fire hose to the face of too much content, some of it extremely malicious, intended to directly take from us that sense of center. So, how do we turn that tide? How do we volitionally, consciously, with others, choose to desaturate ourselves from that business as usual saturation? Again, these are core elements that the only way they're really going to happen outside of the small amount of time that we've got in our course sessions on every other Saturday. So I guess I'm asking of you to consider engaging at this new level for both the individual track and the collective learning track of getting together with other people and learning to hold space and learning to reclaim center in a number of essential elements of ourselves. And then, whether it's individual practices, to learn to take them on with a rigor as if our keeping track of our personal process and our relationships and our presence over time in these, the most challenging times in human history, as if these practices could make a difference. It is very much my experience that they can and they will. So I hope this is communicated well for you. I'm going to include another brief video clip now. It's the briefest version of one regularly occurring segment in the course materials every month. The nature of this reoccurring segment, which is called What We Are Up Against, is meant to be a small sliver of impactful and important and current news about one aspect or another of our global predicament. So it is not meant to be a long doom-scrolling tirade or rant. It is meant to be a significant sliver of information that radically shifts some aspect of this global predicament that we have created and in which we live. So I'm going to include the briefest clip that I have yet assembled for this What We Are Up Against segment. And I hope you will take some time to really let it sink in, perhaps listening to this multiple times. I've listened to this at least 20 times, and more than that if I include the long version, which is this person's name is Daniel Schmachtenberger, and it's from a late in 2023 keynote talk that he delivers in Sweden, in a conference in Sweden. And mostly why I'm including this tiny version. You may have actually seen this full talk. It's about 20 minutes long if you watch the whole thing. And it is also posted in the Poetry or Predicament, so you can check it out. And I'll include the link to that here in this video and in the show notes. Why I'm including it is that I've lost count of how many people who have seen many of the segments of that long conference, and especially the Daniel Schmachtenberger elements. They've watched them. Good old Daniel Schmachtenberger put out thousands of hours of information in his videos over the past 5 years. I've lost count of the number of people who, when they see this tiny clip, they realize they didn't hear it. They didn't hear this particular part of Daniel Schmachtenberger's talk. He's sharing in a quite intimate and in a way that is filled with a gravitas that I've never heard him speak with before. I ask you to listen to it again, not as some sort of shock value, doom scrolling exercise, but something to shift, hopefully, ourselves into a different level of engagement, a different level of intent, because this is truly what we're up against. The last thing I'll complete with in this particular moment is I've actually I've actually run into a number of older mentors, guides over the years, especially in the past 20 years or so. Most of them elders in their communities, in their lineages, and the message quite clearly and said in different ways is basically this is the time to find our people. And this is also the time to do our inner work. It's the spiritual, foundational, the psycho-spiritual and foundational work that makes up the inner work of collapse. Again, those are not their words, but this is what I've been hearing from them for 20 years now. And I've got to say that our lead time is basically done. We're if you haven't been doing psycho-spiritual work for quite some time, you've got your work cut out for you. And if my word is not good enough for you, if it's not, if I'm not famous enough, or if it's not from your particular way of speaking about things, I would strongly suggest you listen to one of the greatest thinkers of our time and the greatest futurists of our time, Daniel Schmachtenberger, as he speaks about what we are now facing, what is now imminent is the word he uses. Um, I hope it forms a wake-up call of sorts to engage in expanding your capacity to be present in the face of greater and greater stressors, and all of that in service of those you love. Now's the time to take on these skill sets, to expand these capacities. And that is the work of living resilience and the inner work of collapse. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you will join us in this Islands of Sanity in a Mad World course. Uh, Feel free to join us first in the online community space of living resilience. And from there, usually join us in the course or any of our other courses or our special focus groups as well. Thank you so much for whatever you're doing to expand your capacities, to expand your expression of love and coherence and humanity in these troubling times. Thank you.
I don't want people to think about how to make their own life regenerative because it doesn't matter. I don't want people to think about how to make Sweden regenerative. I want people to think about what it would take to turn the entire arc of humanity factoring what is currently driving it, and that everything else that you could do doesn't matter at all, because the end of the possibility space of all meaningful human activities is imminent if we don't do that. That's what I'm reflecting on.
And I find it kind of funny, I find it kind of sad. The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. I find it hard to tell you, I find it hard to take.